Hi there. This video is about how you go about transferring recalls from your old recalls on SystmOne onto our new Welby Innovate Recall. We're going to start by going to clinical reporting. And if we come to Welby Innovate Recall, there's a folder down here, Old Recalls. What this looks at is the recalls you've got set up on your SystmOne unit for your patients that are current, so i.e. pending or first, second, third recall. And then we've split them down into those who are in our new system and those who are not. Now, if I break this report down and come to recalls, recalls, and then recall type and refresh. I've also ordered it by patient numbers, so the most common ones appear at the top. Now, looking at that, for example, we know that hypertension 12-month recall is absolutely covered in the new system. If someone's got hypertension, they will have an annual review. So basically, those don't need any action. They don't need worrying about. If you wanted to, you can do some things to try and clear them off your system. The best way I've found of doing it, if you right-click an action and do amend recall type, it won't let me for that one. I'd have to do it in stages. Let me pick a smaller group. Let's say NOAC or DOAC. I'm not going to actually do this. But what you could do is replace it with a kind of dummy recall. And what you can even do is create a new one that's, for example, called delete covered by new system. We've done that in some places as a way of just making it really explicit when we know these set of recalls don't need work looking at because we know the new system covers it. So, for example, pre-diabetic annual health review, the system covers. Diabetics get 6 monthly HbA1c, the system's got it covered. But there are some here where we don't know so much. So, for example, annual health review. I don't know quite what the practice means by that. If we look into it, it might be really clear that those patients are covered, and so we're fine, and we can ignore those. Or it may be that there's something that's perhaps isn't covered by the system, and we need to look at that. I suspect it's highly likely it will be covered, but you might want to check on a few first. 3 monthly blood test. Now, again, I suspect the vast majority of those will be covered because the system covers all sorts of 3 monthly bloods. But just because they're in this report doesn't mean necessarily that our system's covering what your old recalls have got. So, for example, it might be they've got a patient-specific recall in there for PSA. Now, our system can set that up, but you'd have to find that patient and add them on. So how do you go about doing that? Well, it really is those patient-specific recalls that you need to be concerned about, and the ones that aren't covered at all by the system. So the highest priority are probably these ones, the ones that we know are definitely not in the system. And going through these will help identify where the gaps might be. Now, again, some of these we're not too worried about. Over 75s, not something the recall system's doing anything with, and as far as I know, most practices don't do anything with either. There are some in here that are a bit surprising. Asthma annual recall. That will almost certainly be patients who have got an asthma recall set up, but haven't had any inhalers in the last 12 months. So according to QOF rules and what our system follows, they don't need an annual review. BP check, that's a bit more interesting. So it might be that those have been set up for either a one-off or regular blood pressure check. And if they're not covered in our system, they're not currently going to be brought in. So you might want to look at those and think about transferring those over. Equally, it may be that as you look at them, it becomes clear. For example, you could break it down as well on the recall dates. And it might be very obvious that these were things that were done. Let's have a look. Yeah, were done a long time ago. So some of them certainly are way back, and some are way in the future. So it may be that as a practice, you already know why those are there. Looking at those dates, it looks very unlikely there's anything particularly of significance in there. B12, our system does cover if you want to use it for B12 invites. We can show you how to do that. Annual blood test recall. These ones are definitely worth a look at, particularly where the dates are sort of in the next year or two, because that probably is either, well, it's probably a patient-specific recall test. It's possible it's linked to a medication, but if it was, it's really likely that our system would cover it. Again, similar to the asthma, what can happen is the recall set up because a patient's put on a repeat medication. The repeat is stopped, the recall isn't. That's one of the advantages of our approach using reports. So if the repeat prescription is stopped, effectively the monitoring stops automatically. So I would suggest for something like that you look through these, cancel them if they're not needed, or put them onto your recall system. Moving forward though, whilst there's some priority ones like that, perhaps 6 monthly blood tests, there are a lot of patients with a lot of recalls. So how do you manage it? Well, I think from a risk point of view, there's a lot of assurance from knowing that our system will cover all the kind of regular monitoring and annual reviews that you need. What you could do, and what some practices do, is run the two side by side for a short while. So perhaps you still run your recall letter generation, and you use that as a way of checking, is this patient covered in the new system? If so, great. If not, if it's not covered, then I need to add it in. Or look first, is this recall actually still needed? Again, you may well find a lot are no longer needed. There is one other thing that you can do that might be useful. You might want to consider just switching to a different system for a minute. Most practices have recalls on their home screen. Once you've kind of finished transferring over, we have them normally hidden like that, so they're visible if we need, but generally we're not looking. But it may well be quickly looking at that, medication check pending. We know that's always covered by the system. We come on the recall overview, we can see the medications that are monitored. We're using the prescribing module, so patients will have annual med reviews. So we know that that one can be cancelled. And we could put a little note if we want, I don't know, covered by new system. If you wanted us to, we've not done it yet actually, but we could configure it so that for a while, old recalls that you've got set up outstanding appear on this screen. It would mean potentially that as you go along, you could start to review them and clear them off. So it might be when a patient comes and sees a HCA, they're taking some bloods, they can see it matches what's in the recall. Or for example, I don't know, the recall's for valproate, they can see the patient's already on it, so they can cancel that recall. It really is up to you how you want to approach it. I think the ones that are most significant to try and find are the ones that you know are configured for individual patients, like PSA monitoring, like individual requests. And it may be that you just need to kind of phase out what you were doing and move across to the new system. There is some work involved, obviously. Once you're on the new system, you should find a lot of time saved, and that's definitely the way to go. One final comment, if you've got scheduled tasks kicking around, which is often the way, there is no way, unfortunately, to find those in bulk. There's no way to identify them or action them. Essentially, it becomes just an ongoing thing of when they pop up, you need to action the the task itself. And then if you've put it, or once you've put it on the new system, make sure you cancel the schedule from in here. Otherwise, it will just keep on reappearing and create more unnecessary work. Hope that helps as a quick intro. Happy to go through it with practices if you want a bit more detail, and let us know if we can help with that. Thanks.